Yesterday, the Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump unveiled a 20-point White House plan. The court asks a full ceasefire, the return of all hostages within 72 hours, Hamas's disarmament, a staged Israeli Defense Forces pullback, and a technocratic interim administration for Gaza overseen by a new international board of peace chaired by Trump and including Tony Blair. Hamas has not agreed. Israel has. Several Arab and European capitals expressed guarded support. Two details matter for perceptions in Gaza. First, the plan's promise of Palestinian self-determination is aspirational, with no schedule or guarantee. Second, Trump's design centers international oversight rather than Palestinian leadership. That will be read as paternalism. Diplomatically, there was a notable sidebar. Netanyahu phoned Qatar's prime minister from the White House to apologize for the earlier Israeli strike in Doha, a gesture intended to keep the Qatar-Egypt channel open. Hostage-taking is a grave breach under international humanitarian law. It cannot generate legitimate leverage for political recognition. Trading hostages for recognition of statehood would collapse the moral floor of the law. Israel too is bound by the law on proportionality, distinction and aid access, so any bargain must sever the hostage issue from long-term status questions, and the plan partly tries to do that by front-loading a time-bound release, but it then ties sweeping political outcomes to disarmament and governance changes that Hamas will portray as capitulation. Hamas has various options here. I think there are four options and each is hard. It can accept quickly and then fight politically to release the hostages in 72 hours and then declare a hudna, a truce, and pivot to politics under amnesty and exile provisions. The upside here is that it saves militants and civilians. It invites aid, it keeps some social footprint. The downsides: disarmament plus exclusion from governance is existential for a movement that fuses military, political and welfare arms. Accepting this while excluding Hamas makes them it emasculates them, and from my point of view that's a good thing. But the second option is a counter-proposal with sequencing to offer a phased exchange: sick and elderly hostages first, then women, then soldiers, heavy weapons out, light arms locked and audited, international force in before deep IDF pullback, concrete economic packages, and prisoner numbers locked before the last tranche of hostages. This is the most negotiable path, but it collides with the 72-hour demand and the absolute disarmament clause. The third option is protracted bargaining under fire. This will drag talks through mediators in Doha and Cairo while trying to hold urban strongholds and increasing the price. The danger is military erosion and further civilian catastrophes, plus rising Arab pressure to take the deal. The fourth option is to reject everything and bet on escalation, to keep the hostages to dare Israel to finish the job, and that invites overwhelming force and risks the loss of remaining military capability and the political base while forfeiting any amnesty or third country exit. Acceptance, of course, is politically toxic for Hamas. Three clauses are near fatal for them: the 72-hour universal release, the categorical disarmament, and the exclusion from any future government. In Islamist movement terms, that is surrender plus a self-ban, and the optics of an external board of peace with Blair, an Iraq-era figure loathed by many Palestinians, and you have a legitimacy cliff. Israel can live with this framework, I think. Netanyahu says it meets Israel's war aims: hostages home, Hamas stripped of arms and rule, and an enduring Israeli security perimeter. The model preserves freedom of action if Hamas breaches it. It also shifts administrative burdens to an international board while avoiding any immediate hard guarantee of Palestinian statehood. Domestic Israeli politics is not frictionless. The far right opposes any apology to Qatar and any amnesty language, but hostage families and centrists may accept a deal that ends the war and returns the captives. The mediator issues of Qatar and Egypt remain the indispensable conduits for Hamas, and the apology to Doha was designed to keep that lane open. Turkey has signalled support for ending the bloodshed. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan and Egypt have publicly welcomed the initiative. That constellation can apply leverage to Hamas. It can apply money, safe passage and political cover if the text is even modestly adjusted. The hard problems inside those 20 points are the hostages returned in 72 hours. It's likely impossible operationally without pre-staged corridors and simultaneous Israeli releases. A rigid clock risks collapse on day 3. Who verifies the disarmament mechanism? That again is a problem. Who confiscates the arms? If an international force does it, which states supply troops, and what rules of engagement apply in dense urban terrain? Who is going to guarantee safety? And a foreign chaired board that lacks local mandate as the government, without a credible path to elections and municipal authority, this is a vacuum that others will exploit. As for self-determination, the language there is vague. Arab capitals will insist on a visible roadmap, not a maybe later promise. A counter-proposal, one has to consider this, if you want something that Hamas might accept without rewarding illegality, then I think that, first of all, there would be a ceasefire and an aid surge for 14 days under a joint US, Qatar, Egypt monitoring, with immediate opening of fixed aid corridors and hospital resupply. The hostages released in 3 tranches over 21 days rather than 72 hours, with proportional Israeli prisoner releases and the remains of the dead exchanged, auditable lists logged with mediators on day 1, a limited mandate international force drawn from neutral states enters core urban zones first. IDF pulls back to designated lines. Verification by a joint cell that includes the US, EU, Egypt and Qatar. Heavy weapons and rockets removed within 60 days. Small arms sealed under third-party control pending municipal elections. Violations triggering automatic aid holds and targeted sanctions on commanders, not collective punishment. It's possible an interim government, an apolitical Palestinian technocrat committee runs civil services under international oversight for a fixed period with a dated schedule for municipal and then legislative elections, tying donor tranches to milestones, and a clear staged commitment to statehood, constitutional reform and security benchmarks in exchange for recognition steps by defined dates monitored by the Quartet plus Arab League. It avoids a blank check, yet it gives the public something real. This preserves the non-negotiable legal point, the hostages returned without recognition for ransom, but offers Hamas a survivable off-ramp, no government role, no rockets, some militants exiled with amnesty, social services transferred to a vetted civil administration. Each side needs quite a lot to swallow. Hamas must accept that armed rule in Gaza is over, that hostages cannot purchase political legitimacy, and that heavy weapons will leave Gaza for good. Israel must accept a durable ceasefire with third-party security in central areas, a dated pullback schedule, and explicit language that links governance reform to a defined path towards Palestinian self-determination. The plan could be sabotaged by Israeli ultra-nationalists who view apology and amnesty as dishonourable, by Islamic Jihad, or splinters who refuse any ceasefire, and by Iranian-linked actors who benefit from permanent crisis. A single mass casualty incident in the first fortnight could unravel sequencing completely. That is why automatic pre-agreed response ladders and hotlines matter. So As for a realistic end state, well, you have to forget fantasies of instant harmony. The most you can get now is a cold, enforceable truce, plus some sort of visible civilian rebound, food, water, hospitals, rubble clearance, payrolls, and the slow appearance of municipal life under a Palestinian technocratic umbrella. If the first 60 to 90 days hold, then you can move to elections and a more explicit statehood horizon and a rebuilding of Gaza. If these if this sort of basic peace doesn't hold, we return to a cycle in which each party believes time favours them and civilians pay the bill once again. Hostages cannot be a currency for recognition in law or in ethics, but policy rarely lives at the level of pure principle. The art here is to decouple the hostage release from the final status, to recouple it to verifiable security and humanitarian benchmarks, and to keep a realistic, not a rhetorical pathway to Palestinian self-determination in view. That is the only mix that gives Hamas any reason to move, while denying them a victory that they didn't earn and cannot be allowed to claim.